Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. It's Jalene with Jovi Star Astrology. Welcome. I hope you guys are all doing well. I am going to talk today about Mercury in the sign of Virgo and its upcoming retrograde, what we might be able to expect, how we might be feeling during this retrograde period. Mercury moves very quickly, as we know. When Mercury goes retrograde, it spends an extended period of time in a sign, and that's where we're at right now. Just coming into that. Mercury goes retrograde 3 times a year. I'm going to take you through the trajectory of the Mercury transit in the sign of Virgo and what kind of aspects we'll be experiencing, and explain to you a little bit of what we might be able to expect. I did a video about Mars going into Virgo and immediately opposing Saturn in the sign of Pisces. Mercury coming into Virgo also experienced an opposition with Saturn in the sign of Pisces. And as Mercury goes into the shadow period of the retrograde phase, it comes into that shadow period in an opposition with Saturn and Pisces, actually just separating from that opposition. So I'm recording this on August 4th as Mercury is entering into the shadow zone. And the shadow zone is basically the degree that a planet enters into as it begins its transit through the sign, and then the point where it will come back to when it ends its retrograde before it starts to move forward. So Mercury is currently at 8 degrees in the sign of Virgo, and so when Mercury actually stations retrograde the 24th and then begins its retrograde process the very next day on the 25th at 21 degrees of Virgo, we'll be moving back to the 8-degree point where it is right now today on August 4th. 3 degrees separation right now from the opposition to Saturn and Pisces. So Saturn and Pisces is sitting at 5 degrees. So we've been experiencing that opposition the better part of this week. And I'm sure that you can tell stories about that. You know, Mercury Saturn opposition represents difficult conversations, blockages, and delays in accomplishing our work efficiently. Virgo is the worker. It's the working sign, the sign of service, the very critical thinking, detailed, efficient sign of the zodiac. And so when we have Mercury going through the sign of Virgo, which represents how we communicate and how we write, how we move, how we learn, we're in the sign of Virgo, which, by the way, Mercury is exalted in the sign of Virgo, so it operates very nicely in the sign of Virgo. It's not only exalted, but it's exalted in its home sign because Mercury is also the ruler of Virgo. We're looking at concepts and projects and thought processes that are centered around laser focus and completing our work or our duties, our routines, our schedules, doing everything just right and precise. And Virgo's very good at doing that. And Virgo can also be very picky about how it does its work and very critical and in its pursuit of doing that, especially if it's not feeling too comfortable, which in an opposition to Saturn may not be feeling very comfortable these days. And Saturn can represent obviously something that we need to learn. So when we're talking about conversations or blocks or delays, it could be actually experiencing some kind of relational aspect, which an opposition generally is. It's relational and it's creating tension because there's opposite energies at play. We could be faced with having to have conversations with authority figures, or feel like we're being criticized in some way. And we can also feel a little bit inhibited in terms of our ability to express ourselves or get our work done. There's just something there that Saturn is blocking in some way, or creating some kind of, frustration in our pursuit to get things done. And that can involve our thinking and in how it is that we are moving around and doing things. So that can be quite frustrating. If you have Virgo placements, that the magic of Virgo is to be able to see the past and where the solution is into the future, and be able to pull those together to create a very precise plan or operation now. And so Virgo has a magical way of being able to sort of pull everything together, and Saturn is creating an opposition and saying, no, that's not exactly correct, or that's not the way that I want it, or it can be very frustrating. And sometimes, Saturn being the teacher, sometimes even for Virgo, right, and running up against blocks, it can be valuable to have a teacher come along and help us resolve something or work with something. We all know that, life is a constant relational dance, that we do with other people. And so we have to learn how to work within that. So it can be a bit of a frustrating, difficult time, but at the end of the day, there's something that we may be able to learn during that process. And a lot of times that's just like, well, not everybody does things exactly the way Virgo would prefer them to be. Life comes in, other people come in, and we have to learn how to balance and compromise that in some way. Personally, these kinds of things can be occurring subconsciously in, not being able to actually initiate or articulate ourselves because of some kind of situation or emotional issue, or in lack of confidence in terms of, within ourselves, whether or not we actually feel like we are doing the work correctly, or in Pisces, Saturn and Pisces, that what we are doing actually has a purpose. Pisces energy just kind of says, go with the reason and the purpose that is going to suit what's best for everybody, right? And a lot of it is feeling, and that can happen too in an opposition. It's like we might be feeling criticized, right? Or feeling like we're not doing something good enough. Virgo has a tendency to, yes, be very critical and sort of, whip circles around people and situations, but it's just as critical to itself. So we're dealing with that kind of an opposition right now, which could be a bit frustrating. And if any of you have any difficult Saturn, Mercury, or Saturn and Virgo placements, that there is a drive and a need to do things exactly how they need to be done, and to be productive enough to actually get a result that is going to work. And so it can be really frustrating when we're trying to actually get those things done. I have a Saturn in Pisces that squares my Mercury in Gemini, right? Another mutable sign. Virgo is a mutable earth sign. Gemini is a mutable air sign. And so when you have hard aspects from Mercury to Saturn, that can, it can be good in that you can be laser focused on what's doing the right thing. But at the same time, what we think is right may not work for everybody. So there can be sort of a little bit of hesitancy sometimes if we don't, to pull the trigger on something if we don't feel like it's perfect, right? A square creates tension, an opposition creates tension. It's just a little different in its, the end result of its expression, but they can be very frustrating aspects to learn how to work with. Once learning how to work with it, a Mercury aspect to Saturn gets things right. There's precision, definitely. But sometimes life doesn't allow us to do that, and we have to loosen up something on one side or the other every now and again. And that can be really hard for Virgo, especially when Virgo requires that anything that we're working with in the day-to-day be maintained correctly and actually work for us so that we can sort of keep things moving. So Mercury and Saturn contacts can be challenging, but they can also be very, very productive, very practical. So we can learn to work with these things, these tensions and oppositions and kind of weird things in a way that benefits us, and in an opposition, hopefully benefits the greater, the greater purpose, right? Or the other person or whatever's going on. So obviously right now I have Saturn squaring my Mercury and a few other planets in the sign of Gemini. So I have found myself feeling really inhibited in my ability to actually get concepts out and let things flow naturally. And there's a block there. It's like, I know that means that I have to make a change. I have to tweak things a little bit. And sometimes it just means that I have to just do it and hope that, over time, I'll learn enough, the concepts will come together and things start to make sense. But I have a way with my Virgo, Saturn, and Mercury placements where it takes me a long time sometimes to bring it all together and put it out in a form that suits me or will suit everybody else. And so it can take me a long time to sort of get up that confidence to get things out the way that my Virgo placements will feel okay with it, right? So I can hesitate and pull back, or it can be wonky and weird. And even if it isn't, I feel like it is, right? So sometimes you just have to kind of go for it and practice, right? Virgo wants work over and over, sometimes tedious and obviously very detailed work, to get to the end that is desired, or get to some place of, where the form is acceptable. So that could be difficult. I was thinking of another situation that is going on right now, exactly in the opposition. Obviously, I'm not experiencing the Mercury-Saturn opposition, but my grandson is a Virgo rising. He's 15 years old. He's a Virgo rising. So he is experiencing Saturn in his kind of going back and forth in between the later latter part of his 6th house and the early part of his 7th house. He's an early Virgo rising, which is right where Mercury is going back and forth. Well, not back and forth, won't be going back and forth over his rising, but it is in the earlier degrees where Mercury is now. And Saturn is in the earlier degrees on the other side. So when things hit the angles, they can scream very, very loudly. It's like you can see and feel aspects when they are hitting angles, especially personal angles. You can feel it very intensely. And so for him, being a Virgo rising and having Mercury on that side and really, just sort of putting out there in movement, his physical body, how he wants to get things done. And Saturn is on the other side in the sign of Pisces, which is relational and sits in his, 6th house which is the Virgo house in the zodiac that's requiring him to do the work necessary that he needs to do, because it will affect his relationships, right? On the relationship angle. And he is learning, and in the hard way here lately, it seems that he has to engage in the relationships that are present for him right now if he wants to actually succeed and actually have the ability to learn what he needs to learn, to fuse the projects that are in place for him. And so one thing in particular for him is that he plays football, and we're in the state of Arizona. It's really, really hot here. And so it's important. The rules are very strict. It's very important, regarding how you take care of yourself, sleep and how you eat and hydrating, and the schedules that need to be put together and adhered to, because for safety reasons, right? But also for performance reasons. And so he is he has a tendency to kind of be a little bit laid back about certain things, or do things his way. And usually it works out in his favor. He's honing his Virgo skills, but he's learning that when that goes sideways and he doesn't listen, Saturn on the other side, he doesn't listen and engage with the group or the teachers that are there to help him, that there are repercussions, right? That if he doesn't hydrate enough, or he eats too much before practice rather than staggering it throughout the day, or he doesn't get enough sleep, that it affects his performance and his health, right? And he's gotten dizzy a few times, and nauseous a few times, and he feels very bad about himself. That's the thing about Virgo. If they're criticized, and a Saturn Mercury opposition can be teachers in your life, or professionals or experts in your life that are instructing you, and it might feel like you're being criticized. But when that happens, then you can turn that inward and really beat yourself up over it. Or you can do a little bit of, getting humble and going, hey, I should have thought about that. But then digging in a Virgo way and figuring out what it is that needs to be done, so that we're learning something for the next time around, that we're having respect for Saturn's boundaries and instructions and requirements, that we cooperate and actually do things the right way. And so he's had kind of a rough week, balancing that out, butting heads with me, and trying to give him instruction with his coaches, with his teammates. So, that's been a little difficult. That's a good example of a Mercury Saturn opposition. I can see it present for him. But those things like that could be happening for all of you as well, depending on where Mercury and Saturn are in your chart. But as Mercury entered into Virgo on the 29th of July, in the last week or so, and now just 3 degrees beyond Saturn, we've been dealing with the lessons of that Mercury Saturn opposition. And it may have felt a little bit like somebody or something was peeing in your Cheerios, right? It's like flattening you down or making you feel like you just aren't getting it right or able to get it done. So hang in there. Let me know what's going on for you, if anything like that, if you're experiencing anything like that, or if you have Mercury Saturn opposition in your chart, or even a square, because that's a hard aspect. Let me know. Good thing is they're mutable signs, so we can learn and move, and we're mutable, and we can adjust. And so there's hope here in mutable signs, even if the lessons are nonetheless difficult. So today, August 4th, we enter the shadow period. So we might start feeling a little bit of that backward movement or regression in some way, or just, thinking back, which can be helpful. It's like, well, I can think back to everything I learned or what's going on, and maybe it will be helpful if I work on those things now during a Mercury retrograde. And that would be a great way to work with a Mercury retrograde, is to work on things that weren't quite right in the past. And things like, things that come up from the past during a retrograde can surprise us. It can be reworking or revisiting conversations or situations with people. Again, Virgo is about work and coworkers. It's about pets. It's about our schedules and our routines. It's about conversations and messages. We may be called during this retrograde to deal with some of those things, and that's the best use of a Mercury retrograde. Sometimes I think, when we talk about the dreaded Mercury retrograde, right? It's like probably trying to put a new project together, or that might be a little frustrating, or if we're articulating something in emails or text messages, things might go haywire there, or we might find that we're misunderstood. Mercury communication. So it's not good they say, to start new things, but with anything else, even a retrograde, life goes on and there are things we have to do. So a retrograde just says, be a little bit more careful when you're doing mercurial things. And that includes things like driving, because Mercury rules trips in cars. And be careful when you're communicating with other people, that you are actually expressing to people in your conversations exactly what it is that you want to be heard, things like that, but we have to move on. We have to do our daily life. And if a contract comes up or a work project comes up, those are all mercurial and Virgo things. We can't just say, oh, I can't do that because it's Mercury retrograde, but it's slowing down and being careful. And the retrograde period wants us to draw from our past experiences in some way, or re-experience something from the past in the Virgo areas of our chart. Because we need to move forward. Clearly, there's some kind of information or something that we need to draw from our past experience based on what we're going to face going forward. So it enters its shadow zone today, and you could start to see some of those kinds of things happening. You could be frustrated with work things, or schedule goes sideways. There's a myriad of things that could happen, but those are just a few examples. So Mercury, as it's moving towards 21 degrees of Virgo, will make a trine to Jupiter in the sign of Taurus. And that is a very lucky aspect. A trine is a very harmonious aspect. Jupiter is a benefic planet that could bring us some insight or some luck, or bring us some help from, somebody that can teach us something, like a guru or something like that. Jupiter represents those things, or it could just give us a bigger perspective of, a wider view, right? The bigger picture that sort of helps us reconcile the frustrations, or help us with our work. Or, if we had a frustrating situation at work, for instance, or with somebody else, the trine to Jupiter could actually be a time where we receive some kind of gain as a result of something we've done in Virgo. Maybe somebody tells us, you did a good job. It was great that you went back and reworked that. Or somebody says, that conversation we had, or that project we were working on, that was just not quite right. Maybe somebody, kind of gives you a bigger view, or a different perspective about what exactly was going on. And maybe, it wasn't personal, or maybe, they actually praise you. Maybe it, whatever you had to rework, or you were butting up against, maybe that turns into, increased income for you, right? Taurus. So this Mercury retrograde trining in the shadow period, making its first trine to Jupiter and Taurus, can be a bit of a back off or relief, or at least, something that may come in and help us feel a little bit better about any frustrations we might be feeling. So that first trine to Jupiter happens on August the 9th. So that's next week. And then Mercury continues, where it will station retrograde on August the 24th at 21 degrees of Virgo. and then actually go retrograde the very next day on August 25th and begin moving back through the sign of Virgo. We'll make another trine to Jupiter on September 4th. So we're reworking something, we're reconnecting with someone possibly, or trying to overall get something fixed or taken care of. And we have that second trine to Jupiter on September 4th, which brings us some kind of help, good luck, or opening or growth in some way within those situations. Mercury will make a conjunction, an aspect with the sun on September 6th, that we call that a cazimi, and that means that Mercury enters into the heart of, cazimi means the heart of the sun, and it's much like what they talk about when there's a storm, like a hurricane, for instance, or a tornado, that when you're in the eye of the storm, it's likely the safest place and the calmest place. And so on the 6th of September, and it's a short window of time because, even though Mercury is moving backward and it's a little bit slower, the sun will move the next day, that we have a window of time there where we might be able, the sun can actually light up Mercury, put us in a bit of a sheltered place where we might be able to settle down and get some perspective around the projects or situations, conversations, anything like that, work that we're doing, things that we're trying to maintain, our schedules. We might get a little bit of insight or clarity or sort of an opening that allows us to be a little bit more productive and precise, right? So September the 6th. We have, and then Mercury will station direct, which means it stops, and stationing direct means it's going to move forward. So it has reached its retrograde at 8 degrees of Virgo, and will station direct on September the 15th, where it will begin to move forward. Then on the 23rd of September, Mercury will make its third trine to Jupiter, and as it's coming out of its retrograde, and it will exit its shadow period on September the 29th. But as it's coming out of the retrograde, it will trine Jupiter for the third time. And that happens during a retrograde, that happens. There are three, if it's going to make an aspect to a planet, a slow moving planet, it's going to make that aspect 3 times. So there's the beginning of a situation, then we're in the middle of whatever situation it is, and then there's a resolution when it hits that third aspect. And so 3 trines to Jupiter is very positive during Mercury retrograde. That will happen on September the 23rd. And then on the 29th, we'll exit the shadow period and begin to move into the sign of Libra. And on the 30th, which I won't talk too much about intensely, on the 30th, we'll make a trine to Uranus in the sign of Taurus, where we could see some big change, receive some kind of insight, or actually be able to feel like we're moving forward and we've broken through whatever the lessons are, situations are that we've been dealing with during this Mercury retrograde. So that is the trajectory of Mercury in Virgo, and what the retrograde process will bring us. I am going to go ahead and throw the chart up here for you as well. I know I went through all those aspects. I actually wrote some notes and was referring to those a little bit. It's hard to remember all these dates. I mean, I could go through the chart and click, 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 but I'm kind of playing a little bit with how what the best way to actually do these things are, and it is a work in progress. But as you can see here, Mercury, this is on August 4th, Mercury at 8 degrees Virgo, and moving forward, as I mentioned, we'll hit that trine here to the planet Jupiter on August the 9th. And we'll continue until it is actually coming into 21 degrees. You'll see the S come in right there on August 23rd. That S right there means that it's stationed, which means it's stopped and it's slowed down because it's ready to start going backwards into its retrograde. And then it is in retrograde. That's the green, the red RX there. That is the retrograde in process. And we'll go back. I want to just go through this. This kind of gives you a picture of everything that I was talking about. We'll go back to 8 degrees. You can see it slows down where it stations again, and that means it's stopping. It's going to move forward. And incidentally, when a planet stations, it's very, very strong. So that will be happening, like I mentioned, on the 15th. And then it will begin to move forward again. And as Mercury begins to move forward, still in its shadow period, will hit that trine again to Jupiter between the 24th and the 25th, will be the exact trine. Remember, aspects definitely stay in play 3 degrees before, 3 degrees after. Some astrologers use, some astrologers use wider aspects, and that can apply as well. I've read and I've seen astrologers use up to 10 degrees, but I like to stay, especially with the fast moving planet, within like 3 to 4 degrees. The slower moving planets, I think that the effect hits at a wider orb. That's what we call it, an orb. So I usually use about 10 degrees for that. Mercury will continue to move forward. Oops, I went past, like I said. Let's see. Where's the Cazimi? I think I wanted to show you guys the Cazimi. We'll go back and take a quick look at that. There it is on September the 6th, Mercury exact in the heart of the sun on the 6th. Now they talk about astrology. We talk about combust planets too. When they're exactly conjunct one another, this is a Cazimi. And like I had explained what that meant, it's an opportunity there for sure. But as a planet moves close to the sun within about 10 to 12 degrees, they call it a combust planet. So 10 to 12 degrees before, and it's a combust planet. And that means the sun is burning up the qualities of the planet. So in this case, it would be Mercury. So, you know, leading up to this Cazimi, and of course with the Saturn opposition, you know, that's where we could still feel like things are going a little bit wonky, and we just don't, maybe we're not able to think clearly. We feel like, you know, we don't have information or even the energy, right? Physically to do something. It's just like something that may not feel right in our expression. And that might be during those periods where we see the biggest, you know, if you want to call it negative or reverse effect of the Mercury retrograde. Okay, I wanted to show that Cazimi, and then we go forward back to where it stations on and then moves at station. It'll be at 21 degrees. So that's where it will end its retrograde. And then move forward. Making that trine to Uranus, that exact trine to Uranus on September 30th, and then moving along its way where it enters the sign of Libra on October the 5th. So that's Mercury retrograde. That's what's going on. keep, jot down those dates, or you can go back and look at the video. Overall, I think that this might be a bit of a frustrating start to Mercury's entrance into Virgo, meeting with some roadblocks or some issues possibly with other people. But there will be some opening up. There will be something that we are able to gain some kind of knowledge from, or accolade in some way, potentially with those trines to Jupiter. So all in all, it's not, in my opinion, a really intense or difficult retrograde period. And Mercury retrograde, or any retrograde, shouldn't be feared anyway, because it's an opportunity for us to be reflective. And that is always a good thing, right? We can't always trudge along forward in life without thinking about where we've been sometimes, right? We succeed sometimes by learning from the past, actually all the time, right? So anyway, that's Mercury retrograde in Virgo, and I appreciate you coming and listening. If you're new here, please consider subscribing, like and share the video, comment down below. I would love to hear how this is going for you. Working on doing more videos. Things have been a little bit hairy and crazy for me, but I'm hoping to settle into a schedule, right? Working on my Mercury and Virgo processes slowly and but surely, right? But yeah, let me know what is going on. I am going to take a look again and do another video regarding the Venus retrograde that we've been in, because we've got some aspects coming up that I would like to talk about, and hopefully hear from you guys how all of that's going during this Venus retrograde. It's been a pretty hot summer, right? With all those planets in Leo, probably in many more ways than one. And Venus retrograde is definitely showing up for me. I wonder if it's showing up for you. It's showing up there out in the environment too. I think we can all agree that we've seen some things if we look to match the astrology with external events. So I'll be looking at doing a video about that as well. Really appreciate you being here, and I will see you soon in another video. Until then, may the stars forever be in your favor. Take good care. I'll see you next time. Bye.